Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Tom Blinkhorn, and I'm the chair of the committee that is helping organize this six-session series. Why a committee after Bruce McDonald did it virtually alone? David Bisnow, who started it 17 years ago, did it virtually alone. We could never match that. So we had a 12-member committee to do it, and here we are today. I really am grateful to the committee and especially to our corporate sponsors who are supporting this series. Kendall at Hanover, Ledyard Bank, Wells Fargo, and who else? Caldwell Law. We're very, very grateful for their kind support. I also want to introduce to you this morning our new president, Sylvia Paxton. Sylvia, would you stand, please? I think that I've covered all the housekeeping details, except that Lisa King has asked that these programs, I don't know if you've received a copy of the program when you came in, but they are available for the entire series and are available outside. And if you could kindly leave them in the boxes outside as you leave, we can use them again at the future sessions. Okay, we truly are living in momentous times. Just a few days ago, 8 innocent human beings were slaughtered in a church in South Carolina. And that led to the removal of a Confederate flag. And not too long after that, the Supreme Court rendered 2 momentous decisions on gay marriage and affordable health. We are almost, we think, in a nuclear deal with Iran. Greece is hanging by its fingernails, and the future of the euro is in question. And horror of horrors, Atticus Finch is revealed as a bigot. So what do we make of all of this? What is the future of our country in these perilous times? Well, today we have someone who can talk to that question better than anyone, in my view. Ron Suskind was brought up in Kingston, New York, Wilmington, Delaware. He went on to have an illustrious career with the Wall Street Journal, where he got a Pulitzer Prize for his work. He has then written several nonfiction books that are probably the best at examining some of the most contentious issues of our day. First, the financial meltdown during the Bush administration, and then subsequently the whole problem with surveillance, terrorism in both the Bush and the Obama administrations. He's a fabulous writer, commentator, and he's also no stranger to Dartmouth and the Upper Valley. He has been a visiting scholar at both the Dickey Center at Dartmouth as well as the Rockefeller Center. He is he and his family have a summer home on Lake Maury, where he stayed last night. And he is currently a visiting scholar at the Harvard Law School, where he's put together a program on investigative journalism that looks spectacular. I frankly don't know anyone better equipped over a whole career to bring truth to power better than Ron Suskind. Please join me in welcoming him.
Y'all set? Thank you, Tom. That was overly kind, but thank you. Well, it's nice to be here at Dartmouth with this community. You know, I have addressed some of you over the years. I think I'm looking around. You know, some of you were at a talk I did in 2006, which was an important one for me. It was after a book I wrote called The 1% Doctrine came out. And somebody in a crowd, I think it was in a different auditorium, one of you actually asked me a question about George W. Bush and what he would think. You know, and I kind of thought about Bush and what he'd think, and all of a sudden I said, well, I understand your concern. And it just seemed to envelop me. It was a crazy moment for me. I was inhabited by Bush. And everything changed. You know, my walk, first off, you know. It's an easy walk to do. It's a kind of tight cheek thing. Your arms are out. I'm not sure if I want to hug you or hit you. It's my choice. I'm the decider. So after I did that, a professor actually at Dartmouth stood up, history professor, and said, can you do another one as Bush? And so I did a half hour as Bush, and it was extraordinary for me. I felt like I knew him better. A little sympathetic in ways that I was not. You know, I realized that for many years, I've been doing something in public, which is reporting on presidents and sitting with them and writing down notes. But I was also very often channeling their voices. My wife doesn't let me do this at home, so I need to do it in front of big audiences. And we are in an extraordinary moment now. I mean, it's extraordinary for me having written, I just finished my 6th book. 10 years of the Wall Street Journal and 6 books, and really wrestling with a kind of a set of issues that are widely familiar to many of us. Looking at them, trying to pull back the layers of the onion, trying to understand it all at some deeper level, so that I could be more hopeful. That's one of the issues. I feel like, as a people, Americans are naturally hopeful. I think it's part of our character. But it sometimes is difficult to feel hopeful because the evidence doesn't seem to support it. And certainly what you're hearing every day in the news cycle, rushing into your solar plexus, certainly doesn't seem to support it. So what I try to do is I try to think about issues more deeply and frame them more firmly so that we can have more productive discussions in rooms just like this. So I'm going to march out a book here, and we're talking about the world, that I wrote in 2008. After the 1% Doctrine, I wrote this book, The Way of the World. And, these books they're kind of like your children, all right? You're part of the birthing process, and then you set them out into the world. They have relationships. They don't call very often. I consider this a very smart child who has been a little underappreciated. So I'm going to read you a few paragraphs from the beginning, which in fact are quite prescient in terms of where we're standing right now. And over the next 50 minutes, I'll read, I think, 2 or 3 very short passages, page or 2. And then we'll talk about really the stories that are defining this period over the last several decades, but importantly, right this second. This is the way I open this book. From the dawn of time, human beings have been attentive to signs of distinction. The approach of a tribe with a different manner of dress, posture, or skin. The swift sizing up of friend or foe and acting upon it, upon suspicion, was often a matter of survival. Those faculties became finely tuned over countless thousands of years. Now, in a world of vivid, colliding images and technology's bequest of awesomely powerful weapons, we struggle to leap forward, to reshape instinct enough to reach across the divides of us and them, peak and valley, and to do it in time. That shared effort is, at very least, a starting point for a working definition of hearts and minds struggle, that smooth, slippery phrase on the lips of people across the world. Its definitions are often self-interested and oddly narrow, but they are nearly always resting on a fundamental two-part question. Can disparate people ever truly understand one another? And is such understanding necessary for them to coexist? There's considerable debate over the matter. Some knowledgeable observers say that bringing diverse peoples together mostly serves to exacerbate distinctions and fuel divisiveness, something we can little afford in an era of such unleashed destructive capability. They point to countless bitter conflicts along borders and within them and recommend tall fences. Others contend that the world is steadily becoming borderless and blended, and that such conflict, the friction caused by the conjunction of opposites, must be endured and mastered on the way to discovering shared interest and common purpose. One rare area of agreement that answers whether proof of insurmountable divides or of indelible human bonds are found by walking in the shoes of the other. So that's what I've been trying to do, to find some good shoes to walk in. You know, I think all of us can probably talk with some authority about the issues that nettle us. Terrorism, global warming, states rising up, seems like a dozen at a time, to exercise their entrepreneurial rights to power, to primacy, to ideology. What I find after 30 years doing this is that all those thick reports you could pile them to the ceiling 10 times by our wise analysts, are often less powerful than human narratives, stories of individuals that rise into a kind of fullness to capture our sense of not only what's possible, but of ourselves. So while I sit with all those smart people telling me about asymmetrical threats, the rise of terrorism, the search for the thread that might lead to weapons of mass destruction falling into the hands of evil actors, at the same time I look for people in whose shoes I can walk, see what they can teach me. When I'm writing this book, I was at a moment that would be considered kind of a hinge moment of this period. 2006, 2007, 2008. Now at that point, the United States was firmly into a period that showed us powerfully that the neatly divided bipolar world, Soviet Union, United States, A versus B, and all the world mapped as one color or the other, with all of the perils that provided. And all of you have an advantage, or many of you, not all of you, I mean, Tom's daughter, other than Tom's daughter, many of you understand that world. That gives you a kind of longitudinal set of insights as to the world that was and the world that is. That bipolar world where I, as a kid, am putting my head under the desk at school. I was thinking, I don't know if this desk is going to be that much protection against a thermonuclear attack. I was a precocious fourth grader. Excuse me, well, this desk really saved me. Ron, stand in the hall. That was a time of fear, make no mistake. We were up against a real enemy with real capacity. We made them 10 feet tall in many cases when they were not. They were more my height. But it gave a kind of order to the world. Us against them. Cross swords. Moscow v. Washington. I think we got to a point, a couple decades in, where everyone understood the ideas of mutually assured destruction, and that we weren't going to budge and they weren't either. That was an oddly evocative kind of safety blanket. And then that changed. Victory. I'm not sure if you can credit it to any one president. Well, I'll take the credit if you want. It happened. It was a long time coming. Soviet Union poured so much effort into building that arsenal and tried to ignore the fact that they were not doing the thing that societies do when they're successful, which is tap possibility, potential, allow it to breathe free in their populations. And they collapse, hollowed out from within. Reagan happened to be there. And the world was fundamentally different. One superpower. We're it. No one is close. No one. We still have an economy twice the size of China's, and no one has an army. No one. Not really. You know, little glimmers here, little sprouts there. Our military is 10 times the size of any other country, even when you collect many of them. That was the role we said we would assume. It's interesting when you think of the roots of that. I want to mention this because, again, people here, many of you, I love standing with, because some of you here remember something called, let's see, show hands. Anyone here remember the Marshall Plan? Oh my God. We're going to have a little Marshall Plan song and dance later at the Cookie Fest. Most important non-military engagement, United States, 20th century. I'd say Marshall Plan. Think about it. Study it. There's books written on it. Fascinating. It wasn't simple. It had to be sold. But here we have a world defeated. We are the only standing edifice. The industrial power, the country that was hit at Pearl Harbor, but oh my God, nothing like Europe and Japan. And what do? We have fallen enemies on their knees. We know clearly, within living memory, the lessons of Versailles, and we say, we will rebuild you. That's what we'll do. Interesting. Here's the key to it. We asked almost nothing, not nothing, almost nothing in return. Crucial. We could have asked for everything. We could have asked for debt payments that make Greece look like someone with a bad credit card. But we didn't. We said, we will rebuild you because you actually are our peers. That's our view. And once you're back on your feet, you will have the gift of free will to decide what you will do. Will you join us in alliances that really have dominated much of the world post-war? Or not? Your choice. And we rebuilt them. And they said, we're in. That's the world that many of you came up through. I was born into it. What I love about it, transactional. Why? Because The transaction was there, but so subtle. It was about values, the values that are our true strength. That was beneath the surface. Certain ideals, actually the oaths that are what really defines this country and our power. That's what we were rebuilding. You know, I was out of the country on 9/11. I was on a little island in the Pacific. It's a long story. There'll be a book about it someday. But I came back to a world in which we really understood the complexities of where we now stand. Those complexities are ones in which we are without peer, but the world is bubbling up from every direction. Just look at the newspaper today. Look at it last week. Look at it last year. Regions exploding. News cycles crushed and dominated. Oh my God, what's ISIS doing now? I think part of what we as a civilized nation need to do is always be aware of context, to not get swept up in some of the manias that just rush through our living rooms, and as well be clear as to what really defines us, as to the opportunities of this time. After 9/11, we had an administration that made a certain set of decisions. I consider that a great hinge moment in which opportunities were missed. As Rahm Emanuel says, never let a crisis go to waste. He's right. He's not the first to say it either. Especially now in these tendentious and divided times, when left and right won't agree that the sun rises in the east. The only thing that provides a moment of unity is crisis, sadly. Should be different. It ain't. So when the crisis comes, the question is, who will be the leader? Will it be a leader of vision, of perspicacity, of an ability to make from what's in front of him or her opportunity, or not? I think when we look back on that period, on 9/11 and its aftermath, I think historians will more and more say, that was a big shot, a big chance, and we didn't really handle it right. Recall after the attacks, even hated dictatorships were saying, what can we do to help? No one wants the world's greatest power on its knees, angry, petulant. We get it. Your principles are important. What can we do? At that point, we happen to have a confused man as president. It was a bad draw of the cards, and a very powerful vice president. Just think about it. Walk in their shoes, and you'll understand how history really works. The lengthened shadows of great men and women. I reported a lot about George W. Bush. Some of the stories still stick with me. I'll tell you a couple. There's a guy named David Rubenstein who was the head of something called the Carlyle Group. You ever hear of those guys? Big investment bank based in Washington. This is a story I just can't get out of my head. So in 1989, Carlyle Group is doing a little bit of its business, trying to be a grown-up investment bank like Goldman Sachs and some of the others. And they're doing something called Cater Air. Marriott runs the airline catering thing. So they were going to take it private, something called Cater Air. There's a bunch of old Nixon people, Fred Malloch and other guys who served Dick Nixon. Republican sort of crony little company. And Fred Malloch goes to David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group because they're doing the deal. And they're like, and he says, look, now I just wonder if we can put Junior, that's what George W. Bush was called then, Junior, on the board. Now, David says, oh, Jesus, Fred. You know, we're trying to be grown-ups here. You know, we're trying to not be like crony capitalism types, you know. I mean, and Fred said, well, yeah, I get it. But, you know, look, he is the son of the president, you know, after all. H.W. was president then. You know, and he's kind of drifting. Doesn't have much going in his life. This would be good for him. So George W. Bush, is put on the board of Cater Air. A couple years passed, 1991, and David Rubenstein says, I need to get Junior. I need to talk to Junior. He takes him aside after a board meeting. He says, look, you know, Junior, look, you show up at the meetings, and that's good. But you don't seem to know what the company even does. You just tell dirty jokes. You know, maybe this just isn't for you. At that point, the man we now call W says, David, I understand what you're saying. You know, maybe business isn't for me. That's what I'm thinking. And I met with this guy recently, this guy Karl Rove. And I'm thinking of running for governor of Texas. I think politics is my path. Soon he's governor of Texas. 8.5 years later, he's the leader of the free world. He is not a dumb man. He's a bully and he's incurious. He probably has some ADD that's manageable, barely. But he sat at mahogany tables in college, Harvard Business School. How the devil that ever happened? And now in the Situation Room, without anything to say. Now that is something, if you get in his shoes, you can almost feel the anxiety, can't you? Because now you're the leader of the free world. And in the Situation Room, National Security Council, you're the president, and you're not sure what to say. So what happened, interestingly, a few months into the Bush presidency, he took Vice, Cheney, aside. He gave nicknames to everybody. He says, hey, Vice, you and I need to talk. In the room, people keep addressing you. It's like I'm not even there. You just got to step back. I mean, I got elected and everything. I'm the president. And Cheney gets it. Well, Mr. President, I understand your concern there. Look, what we'll do is I won't say much, but afterward we'll meet and I'll explain everything to you. After 9/11, Bush gets clarity. He gets clarity because the way he operated, always, the way many leaders operate, in fact, is he could make it personal. It organized him. He was struck and America was struck. And when struck, he knows how to act like a bully. That's the last time you'll do that. And that was America's posture in that period. Vengeance. Let's show you what we can do. We go to Afghanistan. We lose bin Laden at Tora Bora in December because Bush won't take the advice of the CIA, where they're saying, Mr. President, we're going to lose them. You need to get more troops there. We need to get some of the Afghan proxies in place. But interestingly, already Bush's focus was on Iraq. Now we are years hence. Blood and treasure spilled on two major engagements. And sadly, right now, we have very, very little to show, really little to show for what all of that meant and all of that produced. You know, during the Q&A, we can talk about the situation in Afghanistan, the situation in Iraq. I can separate you, Sunni from Shia. Interestingly, when Condi actually first was briefing Junior W as he was a candidate, he actually didn't know there are two kinds of Muslims. Why? Condi said, Mr. President, in 632, Muhammad died, sir. And they split. 632. Seems like by now they'd get over that. No. So let me tell you about a couple actors in the drama. Can we get along? Are all those 1.6 billion Muslims all out to engage in holy war with the larger Christian populations and others? No. Are certain actors so noisy, so powerfully visible, that the notion of context gets bent out of shape? Yes, it's by intent. That's what they're after. Terrorists, their product is terror. That's what they do. That's their job. We have global news cycles that are on them in a New York minute. Hi, everyone. Oh, my God, I'm having my 15 minutes. Andy Warhol would be so proud. And all across America, they're wrapped. Hey, look, I was shocked after 9/11, and I went on a tear. Where do I end up? Two short stories. I became bound up as a reporter with a character who became a significant character in the book, a woman named Benazir Bhutto. Remember her? Yeah. So I met her in Washington, in New York, in London, and we talked, and she was a complicated character. Many of them are. That's okay. Remember, the human journey and human actors are complicated, just like you are, full of foibles and flaws, yearnings, confusions. We want them to be neat, perfect, and they become brittle when they try. It doesn't work. Smartest guy on this is Bill Clinton. How leadership works when you can show who you are in public. It's hard to do. When you can evolve in public. For better or for worse, Clinton has the single one-liner on this, right? And then we'll get to Bhutto because she kind of understood this. We're in the White House in 1998, in the middle of the Lewinsky scandal. Right when it's hitting its crushing crescendo, August. It's the Tuesday before the Sunday where he does say, I did lie, I did sleep with her. I'm at a dinner at the White House called Youth at Risk. I know. Yes, the youth at risk. She had already left the White House and found a lawyer, Monica, there were some school shootings, and they were a big fan of my first book, A Hope in the Unseen, about an inner-city African-American kid who goes to the Ivy League. So we're there. Big dinner, 20 people in the blue room with that Jefferson picture, big giant baronial table. I'm sitting, Hillary's right here, Bill's across the table. I mean, the tension in that room that night. Oh. The look, Hillary's look, I mean, you know. You could have passed metal filings across that table. And the thing is, most of us were sitting when they came in. So no one had much time with either of them, FaceTime. And so we talk about youth at risk and on, and a bunch of authors are there, and White House policy advisors and whatever. Then everyone gets up, and after a minute, I look up and I see that all the women are on her side of the room, all the men on his side. And these women have their wings wrapped around her. The humiliation that woman suffered as part of a historical record is almost unfathomable, really. And they're there to protect her. Say, oh, God. And I'm over with the guys. It's me and Louis Freeh, the FBI guy. A guy named Steve Hyman, who runs the National Institute of Mental Health. And a guy named Cornel West. We know Cornel. And Clinton. And he looks left to right. Just the guys. He says, this Lewinsky thing is kicking my ass. That's what he says. So we're professional talkers. We're all, shut up, he's talking about it. Here's the thing, I get up in the morning, I can't even read the goddamn newspapers. I just got to get to my desk and start working as fast as I can. It's the only way I can keep my damn sanity. He starts talking about the right-wing conspiracy. Here's the thing. They said to me, Richard Scaife and these other people, they said, we know who you are and we know how you are. We're going to get you. Care how much it costs, we're going to get you. Now, West is summoning. You can feel he's getting ready because he's a guy. He's up on his toes. He's already 6'5", 108 pounds, three-piece suit, the afro. And he's like, my question to you. Now, Clinton's about 6'3", so these guys are up here. I'm watching them from up. That's how can you keep your faith in the system when right-wing jackals in shirts and ties are chewing at your leg every morning, every night? Right-wing jackals in shirts and ties chewing your leg. The man can bring it. Make no mistake. Because here's the thing, Cornell, here's the thing. You see, I got to have faith that the people are going to stick with me here, that they're going to go, West, dismiss. You remember the admonition of Robespierre. I didn't know Robespierre wrote anything. I thought he just cut people's heads off, but apparently he must have. A notion of faith in populi is foolish. They'll leave you in the dark of night and never look back. Because, okay, I know what Robespierre said, and here's my response to him. You say, populi, the people, you see, I don't see them with a big P. I see them with a small p. I'm not even going to touch that line, the small p line, but I'll see them one at a time. I'll see them as individuals. And I hope they see me in the same way. You see, look, I'll say this once, I won't say this twice. You see, they love me not in spite of my flaws, but because of them. You see, that's why my bond is going to hold. Trust me, it will. He's right. Through all the shenanigans, all of the what is he thinking here, all the scandals, Clinton manages to show his flaws and survive. And people's bond with him grows, deepens, sometimes against their will. It's kind of what it takes these days. Some of the challenges Obama had is that I'm uncomfortable with that whole idea. Don't like it. Doesn't like to be shown. Doesn't like to be surprised. Bhutto is a person of flaws. She goes back to take over Pakistan, one of the key countries at the heart of the nightmares we're in right now. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Libya, Egypt, they're all exploding. When she comes back to Karachi, there's an explosion. I was supposed to be with her. My father-in-law was sick, and my wife said, honey, do you have to do this? You don't know what's going to happen with my dad. And so I don't go to Karachi in the fall. Would have been there when an extraordinary explosion occurs, 400 injured, 150 dead. Islamists. Bhutto survives. Why? She went behind one of these big, plastic Pope-mobile-style screens to work on her speech, which she was giving up ahead in 10 minutes. That's why she survived. Then mayhem. The country's exploding. Country of 160 million people and 150 nuclear weapons. The dictator is a guy named Pervez Musharraf. Remember him? He was our friend, the friend of the United States. Bhutto was going back on a deal that she would provide democratic legitimacy, but we would stick with the dictator. That was our basic plan, though we didn't articulate it that way. They'd have a power-sharing arrangement or some such. Well, after the explosion, mayhem ensues. Musharraf doesn't know what to do, and he puts Bhutto under house arrest. Next thing you know, Bhutto is giving interviews in front of barbed wire about democracy, and all of a sudden she seems like a vessel for democracy in this region that is crushed with extremism. And I'm talking to her on the phone at night from this captivity. She's calling at 3, 4 in the morning. My wife's like, tell her to call during the day. Ron, can you talk? This is a good time for me. I guess. Hold on, let me close the door. She doesn't want her advisors around her. These people often find themselves isolated. Presidents too. They're surrounded by sycophants and yes people, and the pressures are acute. So you've got an unaffiliated person like me on the phone with them. I don't care. I'm not on the team. Don't have a dog in the fight. And so we start to talk. Real heart-to-hearts. Tell me again, how the social unrest, civil and social movements, how do they work? Tell me, we talked about Gandhi, yeah? Remember? Yeah, in New York. Tell me another one of those Gandhi stories. How did he do that? And King, King too. They were kindred. Next thing you know, she's marching to Islamabad. And by December, when I visit her in Quetta, which is in the west of Pakistan and the most dangerous city, arguably, in the region, Musharraf's numbers in the upcoming election are to single digits, and Bhutto is cresting toward the 40s. All the power-sharing understandings are all evaporating. Why? Democracy goes against our plan, the White House plan. So I see Bhutto in Quetta. I tell Cornelia, my wife, she's like, of all the cities in the world, that's where you have to see her? You can't meet her at a coffee shop in Lahore? I said, no, sorry, honey. So we get to Quetta. It's funny, there's a little press conference at the airport. And when Bhutto was in London, we could be more, you see someone, you give them a hug. I said, she's like, no, you can't hug me here. I said, oh, God. Okay. What are we doing? You're meeting me at my hotel. I'm not getting near you here. No, you got to get in the car. There's no other way. You must drive with me. I said, I'll be at the Serena Hotel with the triple guards. You come. No. I get in the car. I have a little angel devil, one on each shoulder. Don't get in the car. Get in the car. Don't get in the car. I get in the car. We start driving through the streets of Quetta, a city controlled by fundamentalists who are running the Taliban operations in Afghanistan. Mullah Omar, remember the one-eyed guy? He lives in Quetta. Yeah, we had brunch that day. He was a lovely guy. I paid. That's where they ran it out of. Madrasas on every corner. We're driving through the streets. I'm not sure who's sitting where in the car. There's a guy in the front with a walkie-talkie. There are cars on either side, one in front, one on either side. And the guy driving is a guy that I find out later is named Rezani. He's the warlord. He and another family run this part of Pakistan for hundreds of years. And I see what he's got on the windshield of this Toyota Land Cruiser, a nice one. He's got a picture of his face, like stuck up on the inside of the windshield. What's that? It's a message. Don't mess with this car. You mess with the car, you mess with the Rezanis. It's a message out to all the fundamentalists lining the streets. Then all of a sudden, the guy in the front on the walkie-talkie says, Madam Bhutto, we have an issue. We stop the car. Every time an ox cart moves in front of the car and the car stops, I stop breathing. Well, we said, these 6 suicide bombers were coming. We caught 3 of them, but 3 got through the checkpoint. At this point, I default, and I say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. I'm going with what works. Come on now. So 3 of them go through. Yes, Madam Bhutto. Oh. What should we do, Madam Bhutto? Well, here's the thing. The mayor of Quetta, the new one, who gave us the jammers, you know what they are? They jam the signal, the radio signal that explodes the bomb. The jammers are good. So let's go. I think these jammers are good ones. Musharraf has been giving her broken jammers. She doesn't realize they're broken. And so we go forward through the streets. We end up in Rezani's house. Giant adobe monstrosity, 25 rooms, armed guards. And we sit in a little den, a little room for the afternoon. Bhutto is finally relaxed. We can talk without it being wiretapped because we're sure that those late night calls at 3 in the morning were being tapped by both Musharraf and the NSA, and we were right. So we can talk now. We have to talk. I do not think I'm going to make it to election day. It's just, I have offended too many people. The whole power structure of Pakistan is collapsing. And there's fundamentalists who want me dead. No one's here to protect me. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to call Dick Cheney. I'm like, what? Call Cheney. And tell him what? Let me tell you how it works. There are 30 men who run Pakistan. 30 men who have been running it since you supported Musharraf and put him in power, the United States. They're all wonderfully wealthy now. Here's the way the world really works. All of us dream of the glittering capitals of the East. That's where our hearts are. New York, London, Paris. You need to freeze the accounts of all 30. That's what Dick Cheney must do to keep me alive. That's how you get power in Pakistan. I said, you're kidding. No. Think about it. We're not different from you. We want the same things. First thing that happens, you freeze their accounts. The first call is to their mistress in London. My charge at Harrods has been refused. Do something, you son of a bitch. Second call is from their wife in Washington. Ahmed's tuition check from Georgetown has been returned. Do something, you son of a bitch. That's how the world turns. Can the most powerful nation in the world not freeze 30 accounts? I did call Cheney's people. Of course, Bhutto was dead in 9 days. It was the last real interview with her that day. It's interesting. Searching for hope. how people evolve. They see what's visible. They respond to it. They try to grow, as we all do, under the power and crush of adversity. All of us are that way, right? Shakespeare say, sweet are the uses of adversity, which like the toad, ugly and venomous, bears a precious jewel in its forehead. Find the jewel. It's what we do so well as this country. Budo, under fear, confusion, is looking for the jewel. She knows she may not make it. She's looking into the lights of mortality, and it brings clarity. So we sit there. We sit there eating pine nuts. On the wall is a picture of her father, the former prime minister who died in the swell of dictators and Islamic fundamentalists, just like she will soon die. In the house of Rezani, the warlord, 11 days before her death, Budo looked up at a picture on the wall of her crafty and brilliant father, who was outmaneuvered in the end by an Islamist general. My father would say, keep going, keep fighting. But it's more complicated than that, than one battle after another. You have to find a way to stop the fighting. Sitting on pillows, letting her mind wander, she talked then about what she'd learned. A Muslim woman who'd let men, who'd led them in 2 prime ministers, 2 times, led them, quote, by making them feel that they're in charge and then guiding them to do what you want. She laughs at this. You see, they think they're saving you, and you think you're saving them. That's where the trouble starts. Someone says, I saved you, and here's what I want. And it's the same with big countries and little ones, religious leaders and their followers, even husbands and wives. When things really work, though, it's because people realize that this is a lie, really. That really we all save one another. It's the way of the world. Things work out for the best when everyone makes it together, even just a little step. And in that way, we manage to save each other. It's a tragedy that American leaders, so convinced of their tactical skills and shrewdness, would ignore the unexpected, Budo's evolution. This is human narrative, remember? And not see how she might turn into the next great narrative of this period, capturing the imagination far and wide and turning it away from destructive certainty. The United States should have done whatever was necessary, including sending a few hundred Secret Service agents or pulling together a small international security team to make sure Budo lived to see Election Day 3 weeks ahead. It was a matter of will. Cheney never made the call Budo was hoping for. He never froze accounts. He never even entertained it. He and the president once again trusted illegitimate power over sacred principles. They went with Musharraf. Yet it is nonetheless hopeful that Budo, who'd know compromise and corruption and lust for power, would end up where she did. What was happening? As she came down from on high and pushed finally into the crowds, buying them oranges and holding babies, letting herself bleed into them and them into her, was that she was becoming a representative character, giving herself over to the sensations and struggles and insights that are common to all. It's something Gandhi and King felt, maybe Robert Kennedy in his final days, that the giver receives and the receiver gives, and then they become indistinguishable. It's what transformed those men. Budo is not their peer, but she saw it. Everyone says everyone, no one is owed. These are the virtues and oaths that have always lifted America. They are. You know, these oaths, freedom, democracy, transparency, rule of law, that sometimes on the global stage now we see and employ as matters mostly of convenience, are our true power. More powerful than any armies assembled on any borders. And when you go to Pakistan and Afghanistan and Egypt, and frankly, all over the world, they actually have them pinned up on the wall, saying someday we too. Just, it would be better for us if you seemed to trust them. It would give us coherence, a frame of reference, a pathway. But often, with the complications of the exercise of power, all of that now so visible in the connected and transparent world, it seems like you don't trust them either. So when we talk about that hearts and minds struggle and talk about why America has grown strong and how it can remain strong in an ever more exploding and complex world, it comes back to something very basic that everyone in this room, especially who lived through the Great War, the Marshall Plan, America's high water marks, and we are anything but perfect. Each of you understands. Be true to your oath. Things will work out. Let's go eat some cookies. Thanks.
We have enough questions here to go until maybe 6 o'clock tonight, but I want to truncate this and go with the first one. First one. Thank you, Mr. Suskind. Have you thought about running for president?
The first Jewish president.
Okay, you spoke, Mr. Suskind, of past leaders in an age of fear. What can you tell us of our present administration and its efforts to rebuild relations that have been broken?
Okay, so I figured during the Q&A we'd get to current affairs, and so let's go right to Obama and what happens. Now, when Obama arrives, there's a great deal of hope about how Obama would restore moral authority that had been eroded during the Bush era. Some of that erosion was truly part of the strategic model of our enemies. That was what their plan was. I mean, and Obama in his campaign speeches seemed very strident about repair to America's prestige. He seemed to understand the thing that I said about our power are in these principles that we need to restore and trust. It didn't happen quite that way at the start. I'm feeling some outcomes now are a little bit more hopeful. But of course, he doesn't close Guantanamo as he promised. That was a part of this repair, this restoration. He had trouble managing. Now, mind you, here's a guy, for all of his brilliance, and he is brilliant, and an extraordinary public actor, had only managed his one-man show his whole life. He had never managed anything. And suddenly he's sitting on top of the most complex managerial organism on the planet. And he felt the gaps, confusions, and stumbling difficulties of not knowing how to do that. There's a great speech he gives in Cairo in the spring of 2009. If you want to go back and see a good speech, go online and you can even hear it and read it, where he really steps up. Here's a guy with a Muslim father. Obviously he's a Christian, but a Muslim father who looks like the world, mind you. And he gives an amazing speech, which really could have been right out of Way of the World. I mean, powerful as to where America will now go to at least try to heal some of the divides, to be aware of how we often complicate rather than solve problems, understanding that Muslims are not based on faith violent. People have hijacked that religion, and they have. Amazing speech. A month after that speech in the White House, he's saying to his advisors, you know, the one thing I can do are these speeches. It's my best thing. We need strategic plans to follow them up, to harness them, to make something of them. That's a management problem. It's also a problem of not having clarity about what he wanted to do. He had a learning curve. It was a big one. Mind you, that speech in Cairo was so powerful that the next few days and the weeks to follow, the streets of Tehran were bubbling. I mean, think about that. That's the dream. He was signaling in a speech to the capital of an archenemy, affecting their policy, affecting their landscape. Didn't know what to do. Let's jump ahead because Iran is on everyone's mind. Iran is a place of opportunity. It is. Two stories. One, it's crucial. After 9/11, in those days where everyone's saying, okay, I get it, what can I do? In concert with the United States, one of those countries was actually Iran. In 2002 and 2003, and especially after we had 150,000 troops in Iraq, the Iranians came to us. It was in the 1% doctrine in that book. It's amazing. I'm like, could this be true? It was. They basically came to us and said, look, we cry uncle. You got 150,000 troops in Iraq. Arguably the only yield of Iraq that worked was this. And let us help. Look, we'll talk about the nuclear program. We can work with that. And we can help you in Afghanistan. I mean, we know those people. You don't even know where you're going. Dick Cheney's position on that was real men go to Tehran. That's next. We don't talk to the Iranians. Snubbed them. Snubbed them. My point is that Iran has opportunities for us to leverage. They have a very, very complete and strong educated and mercantile class that have been yearning for decades to say, please stop the nonsense. Let us engage with the world. We have Iranian scholars coming all the time to universities here. Many of them are brilliant. Remember, this is Persia. This was the heart of the golden age of that region. And that's not nothing. Of course, that was 960. But it's part of their tradition. Avicenna. And it's important for us to remember this too. He was their great thinker. Many of the developments in medicine and philosophy come from him. In fact, at that period, the church, you know them, the church was clamping down on dissent, meaning free thought in what we now call the West. The translations of the Greeks by Avicenna was what kept them alive. It wasn't here, it was there. Why I say that, it's because it helps us see that we are all essentially identical in all of the important ways. It's the question of how civilizations turn and rise or fall. So that's why Iran is a place of opportunity. Now, right now, the deal with Iran is risky. Every one of these deals, whether it's Nixon opening China, or for that matter, even the Marshall Plan, had risks. You can't act without risk. But if people don't see potential rewards and only say, yes, there are risks, and thereby I'm saying no, that's a triumph of fear over clarity. What would I say would be the outcome for Iran that will be most opportunistic? And I'll finish with Iran in 8 seconds. What I'd be doing right now if I was in the White House I would pull together the 5 countries in an amazing, Russia, China, together. Who ever heard of that? We are, the 5 plus, are negotiating with the Iranians. Talking about finding shared purpose across divides. Putin and Obama? What I do is get all countries together right now to say, how many trade deals can we do? How many business alliances can we forge? How many academic alliances today? Just do it fast. Because once that happens, just like it was with détente and the Soviets, everything changes. The self-interest of the actual population that can throw out Khamenei, and they can, becomes allied with values. That's the chance we have now. Years, will they build a program or not? Will they get arms and send it to bad actors? Look, every country does bad stuff. And many countries have weapons, WMD now, many countries. But if we miss that opportunity, history will frown on us now.
Thanks, Ron. Very good. In actual fact, you have just answered several questions that were asked about the nature of your take on the nuclear deal. Thanks for that clarity. Okay, here's another one.
I figured we'd have a couple, so I just knocked them off at once.
The first part of your comment, speculative question about what do you think an Obama administration would have done after 9/11? That was different from what the Bush.
That's a great question. Who asked that question?
A couple of brilliant people in the back.
Can I see a hand of that person? Okay. Hi. Can you go on the road with me now from this? We're doing a show in Des Moines and Cleveland. It'll be fun for you. So I think the Obama administration would have acted differently. I think Obama, by his natural instincts, would have moved in a different direction. He would have moved based on the lights of believing that hearts and minds struggles are winnable. He would have built, at that point, a set of alliances against non-state actors. Remember, Al-Qaeda is a non-state actor. In a way, the enemy of all states. All states are threatened by these guys. He would have organized it around that principle instead of saying, either you're with us or you're against us. What's that? That doesn't work. And Obama, in that great moment in the inauguration, where he says, I will reach out, I think it was the inauguration, I will reach out with an open hand and not a fist, and discuss and negotiate without conditions, open talks with some of our enemies. Well, you're seeing that now, and that could have been where we were after 9/11. I think we would be in a very different landscape now. And mind you, we would have had many successes that are hard to fathom. For all the talk of Edward Snowden, human intelligence is what wins. Always. Ask any intelligence officer at CIA. It's human intelligence. Somebody saying, I believe in what you do. That's what won us the Cold War. Here's what you need to know. Actually know the people. He's the guy you're after. That's what keeps us safer. It's not bloodlust. Okay.
Okay. What is the title of your next book? What are you thinking about writing next?
My next book is called To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm gonna rewrite that with a new sequel. Because I have trouble living in a world where Atticus Finch is wearing a hood. That doesn't work for me.
Okay, can you speak to the Sy Hersh story and the killing of bin Laden? The background here, for those of you who may not know it, Sy Hersh is a reporter for the New Yorker magazine who recently had a piece that questioned the standard administration line and how bin Laden was taken out. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I know Cy, and we play tennis in Washington from time to time. He's a terrific guy, and he's a hero to journalists everywhere. I mean, look at the longevity of this guy. He's about 76 now, I guess, 77. Yeah. And he's a guy with a kind of bile-filled energy, which is stunning, really. He only plays singles. Doubles is death, Suskind. Doubles is death. Only singles. I think that Cy is mostly right, that a great deal more was known. And I could go on for half an hour about the killing of bin Laden, who knew what when. But basically, Cy's position is that a great deal more was known than we admit. And about that, he is correct. The sub-rosa conversation in that part of the world is one that we have not acknowledged as to how a particular organization called ISI, everyone know who they are, Pakistani intelligence, is in a way the key actor. They're playing a kind of a double entendre, a game of double play. It goes like this. The short version is that those people in Quetta that kill Bhutto are supported by ISI, okay? Pakistani intelligence. How would that be? Well, here's why. Because by virtue of dealing with the Islamic fundamentalist armies and recruits, ISI believes they can make them be proxies in Afghanistan at the behest of ISI, i.e. Pakistan, and Pakistan can have control of Afghanistan. Just like powers send proxy warriors into foreign terrain. Make sense? At the same time, because they deal with ISI, remember, ISI and the Pakistanis are the ones who first got bin Laden started with U.S. help to fight the Russians in the 80s. There's a line, I wish I could say it in Urdu. I've heard it in Urdu, which is basically, nothing happens on the top of the table. It is all under the table. We're like the fat man with the wallet at the table. We don't even see what's happening under the table. But we did learn, and we did know, and we didn't acknowledge it. And that's why Karzai in Afghanistan was so angry at us. He's like, you've got this crazy, blind idea with the Pakistanis. They're fueling my life, my hell in Afghanistan. Do something. This is where we just mess up. And because of that, we knew a great deal about what ISI was up to. At one point when I'm with Bhutto, I say, Benazir, people called her Bibi, Benazir Bhutto. I said, Bibi, what's with bin Laden? It was 2007. I said, it's 6 years. We know he's in here somewhere in Pakistan. Why have the Pakistanis been so helpful? She's like, Ron, let me explain this to you. If you get bin Laden, you and all of your money will be out of here in a New York minute. Right. So maybe the Pakistanis are not so helpful, yeah? That's the truth. The fact is, many people in Pakistan knew where bin Laden was. I think Cy may be going a step into a hard-to-prove area to say that the U.S. knew more as to exactly where he was, but it's certainly something that at some point you would hope the documents would come out to say, right. I mean, many Pakistanis knew where he was in their intelligence community, and some of their generals. Remember, he's living next to West Point. And he's even traveling. He went out, he met people. The guy's a 6'5" Pakistani. Who's that tall in Pakistan? With a funny hat. So I am an admirer of Cy Hirsch, and we've reported against each other periodically. And I always say, if Cy gets it, I'm interested in finding essentially what I think will be confirmations galore, because he's been right. Remember, he goes all the way from My Lai massacre to Abu Ghraib. I mean, that's a pretty nice run. So.
Okay, there have been several questions about Ukraine and also related to that dealing with Mr. Putin. How can we be true to our values and deal with a man who has been so devious in Ukraine and elsewhere?
Oh boy, okay. So Putin, Ukraine. Under the table, the United States actually does quite a bit. And if you could actually get all the intelligence documents laid out, which sometimes I think wouldn't be such a bad idea, because these secrets are quite corrosive and not that valuable, having revealed many in my life, you'd find that the U.S. did a great deal to support the Ukraine that got Putin so upset under the table with money and all sorts of other things. When Putin says, enough, they're mine. Like let's say Texas is suddenly an independent state, and they're thumbing their nose at Washington. That's kind of what it's like. And Putin went in a place where we really couldn't go. He knew that. He's no fool. He's like, they're never, ever going to place Ukraine in the orbit of core U.S. interests in terms of boots on the ground. Ever, America, never. He's right. He called our bluff. Now, it's still a mess in Ukraine, and it's going to evolve in lots of different directions. But that civil war, like many of these civil wars, is in an early chapter. There are many chapters yet to write. Putin, though, of course, gets terrific nationalist chits by virtue of a brilliant strategy of consolidating power. You know, there are many Russians who remember the Soviet Union. They remember those days when they felt on top. And to be out there saying, Russia supreme, Russia returning, gets his numbers way up. Now, if you want to see his weakness, it's with the economy. And he knows it. So that's what we're leveraging right now. He's been a little quieter lately, because he knows we know, and he knows we know. A lot of conversation up ahead. Putin will be up there waving his arms, taking off his shirt for a while. And he is a global actor that a lot of people, frankly, can't get their eyes off of. They can't take their eyes off of him, because he's acting forcefully, employing his available power, which is what leaders often do, especially dictators. So.
Okay, how can the United States project a new Marshall Plan of its ideals in a world of what Samuel Huntington called the clash of civilization?
Okay. Sam Huntington's clash. I don't buy clash of civilizations. I don't. I've met too many people in too many countries that are not represented under the architecture of clash. They're just not. Are there factions, especially within the Islamic world, that are in clash with Western ideals? Absolutely. Are they outnumbered by a huge and painfully silent majority who say, please stop this? Yes. The key for us is to act nimbly here in terms of throwing those threads out, throwing out those gossamer threads of connection to these many groups who right now are not doing all they want to do or all that we need them to do in terms of establishing a new world order. You know, I mean, think of it this way. Everybody remembers détente, right? That was a nice model for us. China, a nice model. The Chinese and the Russians were bent on our destruction, especially the Russians, Soviets. What does Nixon get? And his right-hand man. Well, let me say this to them. The idea, and Kissinger would say it. I'll do this Kissinger, it's easy. Anyone can do Kissinger. Well, here's the thing. Ultimately, their interests are not that different from our interests. It's the truth. When you go around the world and you get them alone, even people you think we ought to hate, just like Buddha's doing there, eating the pine nuts, people all want fundamentally the same set of things. I really believe that. A better life for their kids, some security, some sense of life as a positive progression, even if it's one little step. That's what shocks me. Frankly, it shocks me how little gives people a sense of forward motion. Just the right direction is enough. And that's most of the world, especially in this connected globe we live in now, where the global news cycles fire in an instant. It's around the globe. We need to control that. We need to harness it. We need to use it to express fundamental American values with fundamental American characters. And we will stand as example and inspiration. Not that there won't be screw-ups. Not that we won't get involved in situations like Syria and right now, in a way, Iraq, creating havoc. Our big foot causing more trouble than anything it solves. That's just the way it's going to be. We're too big, too strong, and too much of a Rorschach for emotions. But the fact is that it's bending toward us. It is. Because they can see us now. There's reaction to change. Many folks in the fundamentals communities are saying, slow it down or go back. Too complicated, unseating and unsettling me. I want to go back to a fundamentalist ideal. It never works. We don't do the Middle Ages now. You can't. Because everyone's in the room together. Look, we grew up in a time when there was a nice big curtain between us. A lot of people didn't see everything. Our half of the table had food and the rest didn't, basically. Now the curtain's dropped. And around the world, they're saying, I want a little something for me. I don't want to wait. And just be true to what you say. Treat me with dignity. I'll tell you what you need to know. There are stories in Way of the World that are extraordinary on that score. I search for them all over the world. Cornelia's always saying, be more hopeful. I'm like, yes, I got some nice moments in there of hopefulness. That's why I think we're actually in an okay spot. And that's why Obama has had a pretty nice run. Because he kind of stuck with that once he got his rhythm. Diplomacy rather than strictly might. I think some things he shouldn't have done that he did do. He undermined his case in many instances by not dealing with surveillance, by not dealing with some of the dark things the United States did and continues to do. But at least on the top level, he's kept it pretty clean. We'll choose diplomacy over fury, though we reserve all rights. And you're seeing it now. Hopeful? We don't know how these things turn out. You've got to be nimble. Look at Egypt. Okay, Arab Spring, 2011. Morsi, first democratically elected leader. He happens to be with the Muslim Brotherhood. That upsets us. The fact is, we probably got too upset. He did want to actually rule. The idea of an Islamic democracy was kind of what he was shooting for. But he's out. But now you've got el-Sisi, the Egyptian leader, big country. He's Sunni. The Muslim Brotherhood is kind of tamped down. Some are in prison. They're Sunni. What is El-Sisi doing? Amazing speech in January saying, we Sunnis have to handle our internal business. We have to challenge this ISIS. We have to say we are a destructive force in how Islam has been hijacked. We got to get together here. We're not only our own worst enemy, we're the world's worst enemy. Because we won't handle the internal familial disputes inside of Islam. I consider that hopeful. People who are getting it.
The media. In an age of the endless news cycle, does the media accentuate problems and divisiveness?
Yes, next question.
Will the U.S. government?
No, look, let me just tell you a little story which I think you're going to like, is that I grew up in the Walter Cronkite era. I see some of you getting misty all of a sudden here. And that's the way it is. All you need to know today. 22 minutes, turn off your set. I kind of like that. Big, strong group at CBS, Huntley and Brinkley for that matter, who says, this is what we do. We're going to be the intermediary for you. We're clean, we're strong. We're objective, for the most part, as far as you can be. And we've distilled down what you need to know today. Now go about your life. There are some deficits to that, make no mistake. But on balance, it gave us a kind of orderliness where everyone was in on the same conversation at the same time. So when Walter says, you know, this Vietnam experiment has failed, Lyndon Johnson says, we just lost Vietnam. That is over. I met recently with a guy named John Lewis. People know who John is? Mm-hmm. Edmund Pettus Bridge. You saw Selma? Yeah, amazing guy. As close as anyone to be anointed for sainthood in America. 50 years ago, as a young man, he crosses the Pettus Bridge, running the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the young student version of Martin Luther King, and he's beaten almost to death, along with all the other students and young people marching into a phalanx of clubs and horses. And in Selma, they had a furniture factory. They got table legs and deputized every man in Selma. I talked to Lewis about that. About for 50 years being a touchstone for inspiration. What's that like? Since he's too young a man, 50 years since Selma. So, well, Ron, a lot has changed. One of the things that's different is that Bull Connor, Jim Clark, the sheriffs of these towns, they didn't have their own cable station. That's different. It was cameras for CBS News. You see, nothing would have changed if CBS cameras weren't filming, going to 70 million people when John Lewis and the rest were getting hit. What happened? Well, because it's offered without commentary. Imagine it being done today by Fox News. Today in Selma, outside agitators and communists were rightly beaten by police. Well, back then, that wasn't the way it was. And so in great human narratives, you're forced to make a choice. Who am I? That's the way it works. Am I the student, Lewis, with the backpack and the apple and the toothbrush because he knows jail time is ahead? Or am I the guy from Selma on the horse with the club? Choose. Even unreconstructed racists felt, I gotta go with the kid. And that's why, weeks later, the most important piece of legislation, arguably of the 20th century, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, is passed. That's a change. I don't think we clearly understand how big a change that is. Because if if all the people watching that were let out of the room of guilt and reflection and self-awareness by the commentators saying, not your problem, outside agitators making trouble for the good people of Selma, you can go back to your sitcom, I don't think it would have happened. So the question now is, in this terribly bifurcated, divided media landscape, where mostly people are watching and listening to those who affirm all that they believe, whether we can manage informed consent, the core of democracy, at times any other than crisis. Big challenge.
Related to that is a question about the Obama administration and its relationship to the message. The criticism is that the Obama administration has controlled the message despite an avowed commitment to transparency. What is your view about the Obama administration compared to other recent administrations?
The Obama administration is more controlling of message and more parsimonious with access for reporters than even the Bush administration. And don't even compare it to the Clintons. I mean, you could call that bathroom phone in the White House at 3 in the morning and get Bill on the phone. So what are you doing up so late? Yeah, I'm good too. Yeah, hold on a second. Wait, give me a minute. And that matters. When I'm a younger reporter at the Wall Street Journal, there was, and under Clinton, that was kind of the end of that. There was a kind of understanding that something a president did was meet on a regular basis with the representatives of the mainstream media. It was just part of his job. That's the way it was. So you'd have regular access that was not controlled. You could ask him a question that was unexpected. You could report about what the leading actor, the decider, the decision maker is doing and why. That ended with Bush. They basically said, we view you media people as just another interest group, just like the healthcare lobby. No special role. I know, you're mentioned in the Bill of Rights. We don't care. And we're going to cut off access so that every time you get access, you're going to trade it for even more, like a commodity that becomes more precious. Here are our conditions. Only one question. You only get 4 minutes. And actually, Obama has taken that further. That's why in the book I wrote in 2011, Confidence Men, Wall Street, Washington, The Education of a President, came out in September 2011, where I spent 2 years in and around the White House and on Wall Street, looking at the financial crash, the rise of Obama, of course, connected to that, and his 2.5 years trying to manage the ship of state. The White House now considers it an error that they allowed me in the Oval Office for a 50-minute interview with Barack Obama because it was unmanageable. And it ends up being incredibly real. Some things he says there that he will not ever say again and had not said before, but that's what they don't want. Power. It's not an issue of ideology or party. Power exercises its prerogatives, if permitted, or not. So.
Okay, you saw Mrs. Bhutto as someone who was potentially a transformational person in the East. Do you see any similar transformational individuals or persons for the West, besides the Pope?
Is the Pope like killing it here? I mean, really. No, actually, the Pope's it. Wow. God, that's a good question. I could talk more about the Pope if you want. Let me just say a little bit about the Pope, if I may. Because he is kind of a transformational character for the West and the East both. Just look at all he's doing that's so smart. You know, at one point, when you have discussions with some of these sources, you know, you put the notebook away, you're just yakking away and chatting about this and that. And at one point, I was saying to some of the Obama people, I'm like, gosh, you know, you got one of the great narrative actors of modern times. I mean, the man rises from the mist, from anonymity to the Oval Office in an incredibly short time. You know, the way he speaks, the way he presents, the way he sums up the aching vision, I mean, the man's got it. I mean, writers are intimidated by Dreams from My Father. The guy can bring it. It's a great book. I said, you know, be more creative. Why wouldn't you do that? It's kind of a question, because I could feel they weren't managing them very well. So, for instance, the idea that reporters need to know what the president's doing every day is a kind of holdover from earlier periods, and, you know, it's a little bit of nonsense, actually. Just have him bubble up somewhere in America, you know, once in a while. President didn't do anything today you need to care about. Next thing you know, he's in Texarkana, he's in Watts, he's in Harlem, he's in the hollows of West Virginia, just meeting people, letting them tell him what they want and believe, him trying to understand what's best. Of course, in these days, everyone's got a camera. Just what the Pope did. Guess what? I'm going to take off and get something at Pizza Hut. I'm going to wash someone's feet. What a guy. I'm going to meet actual people, just like this. I am a pope of the people. People, they were breathless. I am not on the peak. I am walking the valley where all of you live. That's what leadership looks like. When characters on the stage are able to evolve in public, they grow in leadership, might and perspicacity and support. It's hard to do. Look at the dilemmas Hillary's facing. She's very brittle in public. She's very managed. It won't work. That's why we like Hillary best when she's under siege, right? When she's the underdog. Because she scrambles. Because she slips out of message. That's what it takes to be a leader now. A kind of embrace of risk to say, I'm going to show myself in public. I'm going to ask nothing in terms of my own self-interest. I am hopefully going to be a vessel for everyone needing redress, and people do need redress in America and around the world. They're tired of it. They're saying, I'm tired of looking at a 1% rise when 3/4 of America declines in income for 30 years. That ain't going to work. You keep that up, they burn buildings down. That's what happens. We're no different than other countries that way. Around the world, in mud huts, people say, my hope is that my child will go to Harvard. Someone actually said that to me in Afghanistan. I'm like, do you know where Harvard is? It's in America. This is my dream. All over the world, that's what they think. I live in Harvard Square. There are buses. They come in busloads. The dream is to touch what America has, so my kids can live a better life than me. And I live in dirt. That's what I think. I live in a mud hut. And many of them understand our principles, our Bill of Rights, better than kids in high school here. All that is hopeful. Kinda.
Okay, are these times really all that much different from the past that requires us to be more fearful, or are there other factors that are driving this fear?
Yeah, great question. I think there are many factors driving the fear and driving the responses to the fear. And in some ways, we are not in a time that necessarily engenders greater fear. I mean, people lived through World War I and World War II. Some of what we're dealing now is like a coffee klatch compared to that. The whole world was at war, every country. We're destroying Dresden, 60,000, 70,000 people. 20 million Russians, 500,000 Americans in World War II. Those are times of greater conflict and peril. Now, what's different? This bequest of technology has meant that small groups of people, including non-state actors, can get their hands on the destructive power that was once reserved only for nations. That's a big change. And when I write at the beginning of this book, we need to step up because of that change. That's what I'm talking about. That is the stuff of fear, and we should be afraid. I'll tell you though, if someone had asked me in October of 2001, so what would you say the odds are that there would not be a significant attack on U.S. soil by 2015, I would have said slim. I would have. Now, it wasn't just because I was hanging out with CIA people. I think most people felt that way. We forget how we felt, and we forget that's a nice long span. Does that mean we're safe? No. It means we have to be ever vigilant, but again, ever clear as to where our power really lies, and it's in these principles of freedom, opportunity, dignity. And when we treat people with a lack of any of those things, wherever they live, we undermine that.
On that very core message, I want to thank you very much for a splendid and beautiful presentation. It's really marvelous. Great show. Great show. Thank you.